At Westbridge University, fear didn't come from exams or deadlines. It came from one student. He walked into lecture halls like he owned them, late, loud, untouchable. Lecturers stopped correcting him, because every challenge ended in public humiliation. Students learned to stay quiet, to look down, to disappear. He mocked accents. He laughed at mistakes. He enjoyed watching confidence drain from people's faces. And no one ever fought back. Until one ordinary morning, in a packed lecture hall, he noticed a girl who didn't flinch. She didn't laugh. She didn't beg. She didn't react at all. So he did what he always did. He targeted her. He made her the joke. He made the class laugh. But what he didn't know was that silence wasn't fear. It was discipline. Because the girl he humiliated wasn't just another student. Her father didn't run businesses or sit on university boards. He ran men. And by the time the final lecture ended that day, someone, somewhere, had already been ordered to find him. The bully thought the university was his kingdom. He had no idea he had just declared war on the Mafia. Before we continue, if you enjoy dark stories where actions have consequences, stories of power, mistakes, and the Mafia's hidden world, make sure you like this video and subscribe to Friendship Mysteries. New stories every week. Now, let's begin. The sun rose over Westbridge University, painting the red brick buildings in a soft golden light. Students moved across the campus like ants, heads down, shoulders hunched, backpacks clutched tightly, not from books or homework, but from the weight of anticipation. Whispers followed every step, a quiet warning echoing from one corner of the courtyard to the next. Here he comes. Stay out of his way. And there he was. The storm that everyone feared. He walked with a confidence that seemed to push the morning sun aside. Every step reverberated in the empty spaces between students. Some turned away. Some froze, unsure if they should step aside or run. Everyone had learned, quickly, that defiance was never worth it. The lecture halls awaited him, doors swinging open in silent surrender. Inside, lecturers adjusted ties and glasses, bracing for the inevitable. Some tried to look stern, tried to hold authority, but even the most confident of them felt the familiar sinking pit of dread in their stomachs. No one challenged him and survived intact. He strolled through the courtyard, scanning faces, smiling at the fear he inspired. His laugh rang out once, sharp, cold, deliberate, and the students flinched. He had rules, yes, but only rules he created. Respect was earned only on his terms, and those who didn't comply quickly learned the cost. Yet, among all the flinching, whispers, and hurried glances, one figure remained calm. A girl sat at the far edge of the courtyard, notebook open, pen moving smoothly across the page. She did not flinch, she did not move, she did not whisper. To him, she seemed fragile, ordinary. But her calm intrigued him, a spark of curiosity he had not felt in years. He approached the main hall, his gaze lingering on her just a moment longer than necessary. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge him, and yet, in the quiet defiance of her posture, she challenged him in a way no one else ever had. The students shifted nervously, sensing that something different was about to happen, though they could not yet put a name to it. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. The usual chaos of Westbridge University, the whispers, the nervous laughter, the uneasy glances, all of it faded into a tense silence, centered on him and the girl who refused to fear. He smirked, as though already anticipating the first move of what would be another ordinary day. But in truth, the calm of that one student was a quiet tremor, a warning he could not yet comprehend. And with that, he entered the lecture hall. The doors closed behind him. Silence settled. The day had begun, but no one, not even the lecturers, knew how far the storm would reach before it was over. The lecture hall was alive with the low hum of chatter and the scrape of chairs against tile floors, yet the moment he stepped inside, the room froze. Conversations died mid-sentence. Pens paused mid-air. Even the lecturer, a seasoned woman with decades of experience, paused, her notes trembling slightly in her hands. He walked down the center aisle, shoulders squared, eyes scanning, smile curling like a shadow across his face. Every head he passed lowered instinctively, every whispered comment vanished. Some students exchanged fearful glances, while others simply stared at the floor, wishing, praying, that he would not notice them. And then he noticed her. The girl from the courtyard, sitting near the back, her notebook open, pen moving in slow, precise strokes. She was calm, unflinching. She did not look up. Her focus was absolute, almost defiant in its serenity. A spark of curiosity flickered in his eyes, quickly replaced by amusement. She thought she could ignore him, and that, he decided, was worth testing. He stopped a few feet from her desk, leaning slightly on the edge, speaking in a loud, deliberate tone that carried across the hall. "Don't you have somewhere else to be?" he asked, voice dripping with mockery. "Or are you planning to sit there all day pretending to work while the rest of us do, whatever it is you think you're doing?" No reaction. Not a flicker. Just calm lines on a page, pen scratching methodically. The class shifted uncomfortably, some stifling laughs, some biting lips in worry. For once, the silence in the hall was heavy, not from respect, but from tension, the kind that makes your stomach sink. He leaned closer, voice sharper now. "You know, some of us like to participate in class. Others, well, we like to be noticed. Maybe you should learn the difference." Still nothing. Her calmness was not weakness. It was a quiet challenge. And for him, that was fuel. The lecturer cleared her throat, attempting to reclaim authority. "Please, if we could focus on today's material." He cut her off, smirking. "Oh, don't worry, I'm the lesson they all need." He paused, letting his gaze sweep the room. "And I'll start with you." A ripple of discomfort passed through the students, but no one dared interrupt. Not a single person. He had already trained them too well. Fear had become habit. Finally, he sat down across the hall from her, still watching, still smiling. Every movement, every smirk, every flicker of attention was calculated to remind the students, and the lecturers, that he ruled this space, that he was untouchable. But the girl continued to write. Calm, collected, unreadable. And for the first time in years, he felt a subtle itch of frustration. Not anger. Not yet. But curiosity edged with danger. The bell rang, signaling the start of class. He leaned back in his chair, still smirking, thinking the day had begun on his terms. Little did he know, the storm he believed he controlled was only just beginning. The lecture hall was silent, the kind of silence that pressed against your ears and made each heartbeat loud. The lecturer cleared her throat again, adjusting her glasses, her voice firm but tinged with unease. "Now, if everyone would turn to page 32, we'll—" "Page 32," he interrupted, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Seriously? That's the plan? I've seen toddlers follow better instructions than this." A ripple of nervous laughter spread across the room. Some students tried to cover their mouths. Others glanced anxiously at the lecturer, as if pleading for her to respond. The lecturer swallowed, her jaw tightening. I asked you to focus, please. This is important material." He laughed, sharp and cold, standing in the aisle like a judge passing sentence. "Important material? Come on. You're just reciting words. Maybe you should try actually teaching something useful for once." The students froze. No one spoke. The room, once a place of learning, now felt like a stage, and he was the director, writing every line of humiliation himself. The lecturer's face flushed red, but she held her ground as best she could, trying to maintain authority. "Enough," she said finally, voice quivering. "This is not appropriate behavior." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Appropriate? That's a laugh. You're here to make them learn, right? But the real lesson today is who's in charge." A few students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some tried to avert their eyes. He let the tension hang like a weight in the air, savoring every second. He had them all exactly where he wanted, fearful, silent, obedient. Then, without warning, he turned his attention to the girl. Calm, collected, still writing, still refusing to flinch. A slow, deliberate smile spread across his face. "Well, it seems we have someone immune to my charm," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Tell me, do you always ignore the world around you, or is this a special talent?" The students shifted nervously, exchanging glances. The air grew heavier, tighter. Even the lecturer paused mid-sentence, unsure whether to intervene. She didn't answer. She didn't flinch. She simply continued writing, each stroke of her pen deliberate and unbothered. He laughed again, louder this time, leaning back in his chair. "Interesting. Very interesting," he muttered under his breath, though the room could hear it clearly. "You've got some nerve. Or maybe you're just stupid. Either way, I like it." The bell rang, though the sound barely pierced the tension that hung thick like smoke. The lecture had begun, but the real lesson, the one no one else in the hall realized, was about to unfold. And at that moment, every student, every lecturer, felt it. Today would not be ordinary. Today, someone had dared to exist in his space without fear. He turned his gaze fully toward her now, the girl who had refused to flinch, refused to look up, refused to acknowledge the chaos around her. The rest of the class seemed to shrink away, as if instinctively giving space to the storm that had singled her out. "Well, aren't you going to say something?" he asked, leaning over her desk just enough to make her feel the weight of his presence. "Or are you going to keep pretending you're invisible?" The girl didn't look up. She didn't pause. Her pen continued its rhythm across the page, deliberate, unwavering, almost defiant in its calmness. The students shifted uncomfortably. Some pressed hands over their mouths to stop nervous laughter. Others clenched fists under their desks, willing themselves not to react. Everyone was waiting, silently, for something to happen. He smirked, enjoying the silence, the tension. "You know," he continued, voice low and sharp, "most people would beg at this point. Most people know how to behave. But you're different." The girl finally moved her head, just slightly, enough for him to see her eyes, steady and unafraid. That was the moment something changed. Not in her, not yet, but in him. A flicker of frustration, curiosity, and, most importantly, danger. "All right," he said, louder this time. "Let's see what you're made of." He leaned back, still watching, letting the room feel the weight of his control. The class held its breath, waiting for the first sign of what would happen next. The girl remained calm, her pen scratching, her eyes focused, but the quiet confidence she exuded was starting to stir something he hadn't felt in years: uncertainty. The lecturer cleared her throat, trying again to assert control, but he waved her off with a hand. "No, no, let's let her show us. Show us what ignoring me looks like." The girl didn't react. Not a flicker. Not a twitch. And in that quiet, deliberate defiance, the hall felt a subtle shift. He had met resistance he hadn't anticipated. The storm had found its first point of friction. And with that, he knew one thing for certain: she would not be like the others. The classroom held its breath as he leaned forward, smirk widening. Every student could feel the tension pressing down like a heavy fog. He was no longer just a storm in the hall, he was the eye of it, and now his focus had sharpened. "You've been too quiet," he said, his voice low but carrying across the room. "I think it's time we fix that." The girl still didn't look up. Still didn't flinch. He laughed softly, almost amused, though there was a flicker of irritation behind the smile. "Ah, I see. You think ignoring me will make me go away. That's cute. Very cute." He reached for her notebook, pretending to snatch it, and the class gasped. Every student held their breath. The lecturer stiffened, trying to intervene, but he waved her off with a hand, sharp and commanding. "No, let's let her play her game a little longer." He tapped the notebook on her desk, rapping his fingers loudly. "Hello. I'm talking to you." Finally, her eyes flicked up, not with fear, not with anger, but with calm precision. She met his gaze squarely, holding it. It was a challenge, silent but undeniable. The room went tense. A few students laughed nervously, hoping to diffuse the moment. He leaned back, smirk turning into a slow, deliberate grin. "You've got guts. I like that. Or maybe you're just stupid. Either way, it's entertaining." He circled the desk, leaning close enough for everyone to hear, lowering his voice but letting it carry. "Let's see, should we make this fun for the class? A little lesson in obedience." The class flinched. Some shuffled uncomfortably in their seats. The lecturer's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her notes. He caught the movement and smiled. "See, fear is contagious. Watch and learn, everyone." Then he leaned back, satisfied. The girl remained calm, silent, almost unreadable, and for the first time, he hesitated. That hesitation lasted barely a heartbeat, but it was enough to make the students feel that something had shifted. The bell rang, cutting the tension abruptly, but the classroom still felt different. Something had begun. A small fracture had appeared in the bully's otherwise untouchable armor, though he would not admit it yet. And in that silence, one thought echoed in the minds of the students. He had picked the wrong girl. If you're on the edge of your seat, make sure you like this video and subscribe to Friendship Mysteries. Dark stories like this drop every week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. The lecture ended, but the room didn't feel the same. Chairs scraped against the floor as students packed their bags, but the usual chatter never returned. A heavy, silent unease lingered in the air, thick as smoke. Everyone knew something had shifted. He left the hall last, lingering just long enough to let every student feel his presence once more. Each step echoed like a warning. A few students exhaled quietly when the door finally closed behind him, though no one spoke of relief. Relief wasn't allowed in his world. Outside, the courtyard was bustling again, but the energy had changed. Students moved quickly, heads down, whispering under their breath. Some tried to pretend they were focused on their notes, others clutched their bags tighter, their eyes flicking to corners, to shadows, to windows, everywhere he could be watching. The girl walked calmly through the crowd, notebook tucked under her arm. She didn't flinch at the whispers. She didn't quicken her pace. To anyone watching, she seemed ordinary, almost fragile. But her composure hid something else, an awareness, a calculation, a quiet storm building beneath the surface. He lingered nearby, pretending not to notice her, but he couldn't stop himself. Every now and then, his eyes flicked toward her, curious, frustrated, testing the limits of her calm. There was something about her that unsettled him. Something he hadn't felt in years. Across the campus, unknown eyes observed him. Dark shapes in black cars, far enough not to be obvious but close enough to track every movement. He didn't notice them yet. He laughed under his breath at the thought of fear and obedience, yet something small pricked at the back of his mind. A whisper of doubt. By the time he finally walked away, the students were left in quiet murmurs. A tension had been planted, a seed that would grow. And for the first time, he didn't know exactly how the next few hours would unfold. Something had changed today. Something small, almost invisible, but enough to mark the beginning of a reckoning. The campus was quieter now, mid-afternoon sun casting long shadows across the courtyard. Students had scattered to their next classes, but the air still felt heavy, charged with the invisible tension left behind by him. The bully wandered casually, confident as ever, unaware that someone was watching every step. The girl, meanwhile, sat alone in a secluded corner of the library. Her notebook closed, hands resting lightly on top. She took out her phone and pressed a single number. Her voice, when it finally came, was soft, calm, and controlled, almost unsettling in its serenity. "He's escalated again," she said. "Yes, the usual. But he's focused now. Watch him carefully." She paused for a moment, listening. Nodding slightly, though no one could see her, she continued. "Understood. Keep it quiet. I don't want him realizing. Not yet." She hung up. Her expression didn't change. To anyone passing by, She looked like any other student immersed in her own world. But the words she had spoken carried weight far beyond the walls of the library. Decisions had already been made. Moves were already in motion. Across campus, in black cars parked at inconspicuous distances, unseen eyes tracked the bully. Cameras, silent radios, and quiet whispers followed his every step. He still laughed at the thought of fear and obedience, still striding through the halls like he owned them, still blind to the danger quietly circling him. And yet, for the first time, there was a subtle shift in the world around him. The air felt thinner. The shadows deeper. The balance of power, always his to control, was beginning to tilt. No one else in the campus realized it yet, but a storm had begun quietly, methodically, and he had just made the mistake of inviting it into his life. If you're feeling the tension already, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Friendship Mysteries. The danger is only getting closer. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across Westbridge University. Students hurried to leave, their footsteps quick, eager to escape the lingering tension from the morning's events. But one presence remained unaware, the bully, striding confidently through the courtyard, smirking as if the world belonged to him. Yet he wasn't alone. In the shadow of a distant building, a black car idled silently. Inside, a pair of eyes followed his every movement, calm, unblinking. Cameras discreetly mounted on the vehicle tracked him as he walked, recording each step, each gesture. Another car, parked just beyond the campus gates, mirrored the motion. Observers whispered into hidden radios, reporting, calculating, noting patterns. The bully laughed under his breath, unaware. He waved at friends, tossing a casual insult to a rival group of students. To him, it was ordinary. To the observers, it was data, a map of arrogance, a blueprint of his habits. Back in the courtyard, the girl watched from the library's edge, unnoticed. She didn't move, didn't speak. Her calm presence had drawn more than his attention. It had summoned eyes he would never see, a silent warning circulating around him. As he passed a cluster of trees near the dorms, the black cars moved imperceptibly, shadowing his path without a sound. A subtle sense of unease should have prickled at him, but he dismissed it with a laugh, brushing off instinctual caution as paranoia. For the first time, the students watching him from afar felt a strange shift. The untouchable, the king of fear, had become a subject of scrutiny. Every careless joke, every arrogant smirk, every insult he had thrown, none of it would go unnoticed. And though he walked on oblivious, a storm was quietly forming around him. One that would not wait for permission, one that would not forgive mistakes, and one that was patient enough to watch until the perfect moment arrived. The courtyard was nearly empty now, the afternoon sun slanting through the buildings like long fingers. The bully strode confidently toward the dorms, unaware of the silent eyes that tracked him from every shadow. He laughed at a passing student's stumble, smirked at a minor inconvenience, convinced that the world bent around his whims. But the audience, those watching from the dark corners of the story, knew something he did not. The girl, seated quietly in the library, closed her notebook. Her eyes were calm, focused, and calculating. She reached for her phone once more, tapping messages with precision. No name was spoken. No threats. Yet with a single call, a ripple of invisible power began to move, subtle but inexorable. And the truth? She wasn't just any student. She was the daughter of someone whose reach extended far beyond Westbridge University, whose reputation commanded obedience and fear in equal measure. A single word from her could make lives unravel. A single misstep from the bully had already drawn attention he could never have imagined. Across the campus, the black cars adjusted positions, silent surveillance now clearly intentional. Observers whispered into radios, their tone professional, cold, precise. Every movement, every reaction of the bully had been noted. Every arrogant smirk catalogued. And while he still laughed, still strutted through the halls with supreme confidence, the tension had shifted. The game was no longer entirely his. For the first time, someone else had begun to shape the rules. The audience understood the truth before he ever could. He had picked the wrong person to provoke. The quiet girl, the one who refused to flinch, was no ordinary target. And the consequences that would follow were only a matter of time. The storm had begun, silently, invisibly, but with purpose. And when it hit, there would be no escape. If you believe that some people can't be tamed, and that sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous, hit that like button and subscribe to Friendship Mysteries. The next act will show exactly what happens when arrogance meets power, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. The evening sky cast long, fading shadows across Westbridge University. The campus was quiet now, the chaos of the day replaced by the hum of distant traffic and the occasional echo of footsteps on empty walkways. He walked with his usual confidence, but there was a subtle edge in the air, something he couldn't place. Something unseen. He reached his dorm room and dropped his bag carelessly on the floor. That's when it arrived. A small envelope, black and unassuming, sat neatly on his desk. No handwriting, no return address, just his name printed in sharp, bold letters. He picked it up, smirking, expecting a prank or a note from a rival student. But the weight of it felt different. Heavy. Calculated. He tore it open. Inside was a single card. Meet me tonight. Alone. Your arrogance has caught the wrong attention. His smirk faltered. Only slightly. A laugh escaped, nervous but forced. Who would dare? He muttered to himself, scanning the room as if someone had hidden behind the door. Nothing. Just the empty dorm. For a moment, he considered tossing it aside, pretending it didn't exist. But curiosity, that same arrogance that had ruled every classroom and hallway, gnawed at him. He glanced at his reflection in the window. Sharp eyes, smug smile, posture perfect. I own this city, he whispered. No one can touch me. Yet even as he said it, a small, unsettling thought crept in. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone powerful enough to bypass the usual rules. Someone patient. Someone who had been watching him all along. He folded the card carefully, slipped it into his pocket, and left the dorm. The campus at night was eerily quiet, shadows stretching unnaturally long. Every step he took toward the designated meeting spot made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end, though he refused to admit it. Somewhere, in the distance, black cars waited. Silent. Motionless. Observing. Waiting. For the first time, he felt a crack in his armor. Not fear, not yet, but a tiny insistent whisper of caution. And that whisper would grow louder before the night was over. The night was still, almost unnaturally so. The streets surrounding Westbridge University were empty, lit only by the pale glow of streetlights. Shadows stretched long and twisted, mirroring the tension building with every step he took toward the meeting spot. He reached the abandoned courtyard, expecting, what? A prank. A rival. Nothing could have prepared him for the quiet figure waiting in the center. The girl. Calm, composed, her silhouette illuminated faintly by a single lamp. She wasn't alone. Two figures stood just beyond the shadows, silent, imposing. Protection. Observers? He didn't know. What is this? He demanded, though his voice was steadier than he felt. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a single step forward, eyes locked on his. Calm, unwavering, almost chilling in its serenity. You've spent your days thinking you could push everyone around, she said finally, her voice soft but cutting through the night like a blade. Thinking no one could touch you. He laughed nervously, a forced chuckle, scanning the shadows around her. You're just a student. What can you possibly? Her gaze didn't waver. I'm not just a student. She paused, letting the words sink in. Then, casually, she gestured behind her. The black cars that had been inconspicuously following him all day rolled forward, lights off, engines silent but presence undeniable. The realization hit him. Every careless move, every arrogant smirk, every insult had been recorded, observed, analyzed. And now, the consequences were here. You've underestimated more than just me, she continued. You've underestimated who I am, and who watches over me. Panic flickered in his eyes for the first time. His confidence, the armor he had worn for years, wavered. The storm he thought he controlled was no longer his. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but the courtyard offered nowhere to hide. The two figures stepped closer, forming a silent perimeter around him. The girl took another step forward, tilting her head slightly, a faint smile crossing her lips. "This is your warning," she said softly, yet every word carried the weight of power he could never imagine. "Arrogance will not go unpunished. And now, you will learn that some battles aren't meant to be fought alone." For the first time, he felt it. Fear, genuine and undeniable. Not just for himself, but for everything he had taken for granted, his control, his dominance, his untouchable image. All of it slipping, all of it vulnerable. The courtyard was silent again, except for the faint hum of the distant city. And in that silence, one truth became painfully clear. The game had changed, and he was no longer the one in charge. If you believe that arrogance always meets its match, and that even the untouchable can fall, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Friendship Mysteries. The story isn't over, and the real lessons in power are just beginning. The night had deepened, and the city around Westbridge University was quiet, almost eerily still. The bully sat on the edge of the courtyard steps, hands gripping his knees, chest rising and falling rapidly. The arrogance that had carried him through every hall, every classroom, every lecture, gone. Shattered. The girl stood before him, calm, composed, every movement deliberate. She didn't speak immediately. She simply watched him, letting the silence do the work. He couldn't meet her eyes. For the first time, the tables had turned. The untouchable was no longer untouchable. "Do you understand now?" she finally asked, voice soft but sharp, cutting through the night like steel. "Do you understand what happens when you push people too far? When you think no one is watching?" He swallowed hard, words failing him. Fear, respect, and disbelief mingled in a single, bitter taste. She shook her head slightly, almost pityingly. "This isn't just about me. It's about consequences. You thought arrogance and intimidation could carry you through life. But some lessons cannot be avoided." He looked around. The black cars, the silent observers, the empty courtyard, it all clicked. Every insult, every humiliation he had inflicted on classmates and lecturers, every moment of cruelty, it had been noted. Every act measured. And now, it had come full circle. "You've had a good run," she said softly, stepping back. "But remember this, some people play the long game. And sometimes, the quiet ones are the most dangerous." He nodded, finally, fully understanding. It was a mixture of fear, humility, and grudging respect. For the first time, he realized that dominance without wisdom was fragile. That power unchecked could crumble in an instant. The girl turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows with the confidence of someone who had always been in control. The observers melted back into the night. The courtyard was empty once more, silent except for the distant hum of the city. The bully remained, sitting on the steps, alone with his thoughts. And though the night was over, the lesson he had learned would linger forever. Some arrogance could not go unchallenged. Some power could not remain unchecked. And some quiet ones were always watching. If you believe that even the most untouchable can fall, and that the quiet ones are often the most powerful, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Friendship Mysteries. The next one will be even more intense.